do about that? And it was funny because, like, as we were starting the conversation tonight, someone mentioned, let's see, I need to close this guy right there. Okay, so the problem one we're going to explore is really, how do we see our teams? And I could ask you if you can relate to the image up here, you know, the herding cat. Someone mentioned that before we started. And that's what I thought project management was about when I began, now about 15 years ago. So how much time do you spend wrangling people, chasing down, hitting, executing, pressing, reminding, hammering, leaning on, and attempting to get people to do stuff? After doing that for so long, I got tired of that. And so I started looking for a better way. And I'm going to share some of my insights with you tonight, because, you know, here we are in the midst of this really unique experience we're facing. And I think that today's Agile leader really can be misunderstood and underappreciated. Not sure if you're feeling that. But if you're like me, I mean, our whole intention is really to try to open minds, deliver value, and bring and deliver great products to our clients. That's what we're hired to do. I'm sure that's what you're hired to do. And so I kind of feel like how we see our teams is so important, because how we see them really affects how we lead them. And how we lead them impacts their performance. And so if we see them as just herding cats, then maybe that's how they're going to behave. And I would like to offer a different way. But before we do, our second problem that we have, that people have told me about, is really in the area of leadership development. And you know, did you know it's a $366 billion industry? McKinsey tells us that programs they're failing to deliver. Companies are spending like $166 billion every year trying to improve leadership in their organizations. And I'm not so sure sometimes that people are getting their money's worth, because I think that we're still confused around what is the person's in charge being the leader versus the one that's actually leading the people. And so we're conflating authority with leadership. And it's no surprise that those who choose to micromanage in this face of all the change that we're undertaking, oh, I've noticed that they become increasingly ineffective. And even the military has given up on this approach. If you've read Team of Teams or Turn the Ship Around. And I think the reason is pretty clear, that authority alone, it's not really enough to achieve the results that we all want. And the reason for that is because it doesn't scale. It has to go down to the team level. And that's, I think, one reason that Agile has become so prominent out there in the world of business and organizations. So I think that Bernadette Jiwa has it right, that the most successful companies, if they can position people in the right places and empower them, that they have a really great chance of succeeding. But you know, we could talk about all the different things about our environment, but ultimately, doesn't it come back to us? I mean, we are the change agents. That's what we're hired to do. Sure, we could talk about what our leadership should do, and maybe the values or the culture. And I did that for a long time. I made a lot of excuses. I've done them all. And I realized that there's a point where we kind of have to stop doing it. And my challenge was I didn't know what to do instead, because I would think of it in terms of, well, isn't that their job to do? Isn't that their responsibility to create a safe environment, to provide leadership in the way that I thought they should? And I think what happens if we stay in that place is that we become a victim. And I think I was in that for a long time. And so I decided to change my mind, and I started to take responsibility for what I could do and those around me. And you might think, Eric, that's not fair. And I think you're right. I think it probably isn't fair. But you know what? If we want to lead and if you want to coach, then it's up to us to press in to these areas that need us, because that's what we're built for. That's what we're hired to do. And so I think that's where we make the most difference, because when we empower ourselves, we can make change and we can multiply the good. And what do you think? Do you think that's something that you can do? I think it's something that you can do, because ultimately, if we're not doing the things that are helping people and we're not clearing the roadblocks, what we end up with is a bunch of frustrated individuals that really want to do good, but they're just waiting around. And there are times when I feel like teams get stuck, even agile teams do. I work with a lot of them. And I found that coaching is really situational. And I'm sure you do. Some of you have way more experience than I do. And the situational leadership model, it teaches that individuals can receive help and coaching at the task level. We don't have to just assume they don't know anything or they can't do anything. And so if you're really a coach, then it's up to us to call the right play and then let them execute. And I think sometimes we shrink back from doing those things because we want the team to learn. But I'm going to share with you some of the reasons that block them if you haven't thought about it. Because I really think that it's your team is, they're waiting for you. They're waiting for you to step up and to show the way. And that's regardless of whether you're a coach, if you're a leader, if it's at home, if it's in your community, or Lori brought up in your church, whatever it is that involves people, probably this group are leading something outside of work too. Because I really think that in this environment, we're going to have to do things differently. And it's going to require your coaching practices to change in ways that I think emphasize leadership a bit more. And I'm going to explain how you can do that too. Because if we don't do this, guys, what I think is going to happen, and you can disagree, of course, but what I think could happen is that those in charge, the ones that make the rules, they're going to commoditize work, and we're going to work for, or we're going to become the next factory boss. And I don't think we're interested in that, because that will just create a race to the bottom. And you say, well, Eric, well, so what? Why do I care about that? Well, here's why I think you probably do care. Because people are suffering. People suffer in a lot of the jobs that they have. And I'll share some statistics about that shortly. But your career can also dead end if you're not adding the right value at the right time and providing a path for individuals in your group and your teams, moving the organization forward. And after all the things you've tried to do, when all of your energy is spent, you'll see the organization fail. And then we'll all look around trying to find someone to blame. And that's not what this group is about. And that's not what you're about. I don't believe that. So how are your people doing today? And as I mentioned before, I think that people out there are suffering. You know, maybe you're suffering right now. They're under pressure. We feel it. I mean, I'm working more. I enjoy things like this because I'm built for it, and I also enjoy just connecting with people that are trying to do the same types of things that I'm trying to do, and trying to make that difference. It's really encouraging. Tonight's very encouraging for me. But you know, I wonder if people are becoming more engaged because they're working at home right now, or if this number is about the same. Because we also understand that there's a cost when people aren't engaged. You know, there's people that are really all in on the work and with the team and helping and providing support. And then there's those that don't. You know, there's the two kinds of people, the ones that give and the ones that give less and some that take, right? So we could look to technology to help us, but Dan Schobel, he doesn't think that that's going to help. In fact, we're seeing that there's more lonely people out there. I bet you know some. You might be one. So what chance do our projects have, or our work that we're trying to do, or our small business that we're trying to build? How's that going to fare in this environment? Well, most projects have trouble finishing successfully. And I don't think it has to be like that. I really don't. But, you know, in this time, it can seem pretty dark. It's pretty depressing. But it doesn't have to be like that. I think that Gandhi had a great idea. And it's an idea that I hold on to and I think about a lot. And it's meaning that we can take responsibility to make change. And what I want to share with you is a path forward with servant leadership that can make a difference in your team and in your life and with yourself. Because I believe that shepherding is the art of becoming a leader others want to follow. I think it's this model that can help you become the change agent that you've wanted to become, that you're trying to become. And it's super simple. It's super simple because it's all built on principles. And the principles are informed by what you're already doing or the path that you're already on. So you don't have to do anything special. It's not a checklist. But what it is it's an awareness of the things that you're trying to accomplish so that you can get further faster, because it's things that you're already doing, things that are already inside you. And years ago, I created this with some of the people that are on this call, actually. I created the shepherding framework. I didn't know that's what I was doing, to address several problems that I was experiencing as a leader. And as part of my transformation from being a controlling person to an empowering one, I can understand what that means and what that takes. And that's how I help others understand what shepherding really means. And really the difference is, if you're wondering, well, okay, why do all this stuff? What is the difference? Well, the difference is that in this leadership approach is that everything starts inside. It starts in your heart first before it shows up out in the world and what you're trying to change and what you're trying to do. Because applying the shepherding framework, it provides you new opportunities to build teams that are more engaged and I think happier and productive, because we're really just empowering them to do what they do best every day. And it may be just what your teams need, maybe what you need to move from good to great. And I think that's what we want. So let's hit these 6 principles, and then I'll show you how I applied them in my transformation. And I'm hoping that you'll see how can you do this, or how are you doing this even now, but you didn't know it. And then you can help somebody else. But believe me, in anything that we do, it always starts with us. We can't ask somebody else to do what we're not willing to do. And I think that was one of the hardest things, because if you lead yourself well, you can lead your teams well. And it comes down to what drives you. And we all have a little bit different motivations, but foundational to shepherding is knowing your values. What do you value? What's important to you? I shared mine in my introduction. You should get close to yours. Consider how your values align up with the work that you do. And the reason it's important, if you're wondering, is because values, well, they filter how you see the world, how you relate to people, and they drive your behavior. They drive your team's behavior too. And understanding what their values are and how they line up, finding a common denominator where you can agree, is super important. But as we are pursuing our leadership journey, you'll find almost immediately, if you have any self-awareness, that there's a tremendous gap between where you are today and where you want to go. And it's different for everybody. In fact, I remember boy, it's been about 4 or 5 years ago as I was kind of putting some of these ideas together in a way I could share. And I was having coffee with a friend, and he was asking me, what I wanted to do and how I was going to, get to this next role that I was talking to him about. And I shared with him the things that I thought I was good at, and I shared with him the things that I was not so good at. And he thought, well, you should do more of what you're good at. And I thought that was pretty smart, because I told him all the things that I wasn't good at. And he says, Eric, you're pretty self-aware. And that was probably the first time that I'd heard those words that way. And I saw that he was trying to explain to me that there's an emotional intelligence aspect to what I needed to dig into, because there's so many things that people notice about us that we don't. And what that means is, just like when my daughter would draw pictures of our family when we were younger. We have a 10-year-old now, but when she was like 3, she'd draw these really great images of us in colors and such, until she was about 5. And then she started drawing me like the image that you see on the screen. The back of the head, that's pretty much what mine looks like. You probably can tell that. But we all have bald spots. We do. And if you don't think so, just ask the person you live with. They'll tell you where yours are. And that's probably a great place to think about what needs to change. Because servant leadership, it's a philosophy and set of practices that it'll enrich other people. It builds better organizations, and ultimately it creates a more just and caring world. And the thing about servant leadership is that it's not about us. It's about those that we choose to serve. It's never been about us. Leadership has never been about the person with the title. So Lori and I were talking before we got together, and we were wondering, like, how is working remotely right now affecting your teams? Do you think it's good for your team? Here's a poll for you. Share with us what you think.
Well, the agrees and disagrees are head to head. A couple more seconds, and I'm gonna end in. All right, let's take a look.
Yeah, I'm scared to ask for opening up the mics and having people talk about this. So we got quite a few that agree it's been good for their team. I'd be interested to know a little bit more about that. I can definitely relate to the disagree, because that was my vote. Not sure it's so good about my team, but maybe there's something unique about the teams where it's actually been a good thing. I would love to hear about that. So if there's someone who answered the agree or strongly agree, is it okay, Laura, if we let them talk about that for a minute?
Absolutely.
Okay. Would someone be brave enough to share?
I can. This is Alex.
Great, go ahead.
So I said agree, not strongly agree. My team, we're located in Boulder. Some of us drive in from Denver or South Denver. It cut down on our commute times. We found out that we were able to be just as effective from home, essentially. There were some hiccups getting used to Zoom and other technologies, as pretty much everyone experienced back in March and April. But we found that we were able to produce as much value. We measure our work in terms of the value we produce, not our velocity and other things. So the value that we produced in terms of our stakeholders and customers, which are on the government side, was just as good, if not a little bit higher in the past 2 quarters. So it worked out pretty well for us. People are pretty happy. I do like going into the office. And so most people agree, let's hold office meetings every once in a while, but people now prefer to work remotely at least 80% of the time.
That's a great story. Is there someone else that wants to share that also agreed?
Yeah, this is David Gearing. I actually strongly agreed.
Okay.
While we've had some very unique challenges with the pandemic, it's brought the team closer together, because we've really had to swarm around those unique challenges and be creative together about how we resolve them, and really be very conscious about doing PI planning as an example remotely, and that we're all in this together. So I think it's made us a higher performing team.
Oh, that's terrific. I'm glad to hear that. That's very encouraging because maybe you have the pathway for all of us to move forward in probably it's a changed landscape, going forward. So thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. Well, in addition to leading ourselves, the second principle that we need to think about in shepherding other people is really entering their world, which we just started talking about with the responses from Alex and others. It does require us to do things maybe a little bit differently. And I love the image that I found here to represent that, because it's hard to do this on the video, but holding your hands out that way and offering those in friendship to others, I think is very powerful, because it's really where the best leaders begin building trust. We all want that, but sometimes we're not sure exactly how to start doing it. We know how to lose it real quick. But I'm going to share something with you that took me a long time to learn, and maybe it'll be worth the time that you've spent here tonight. And for people like me who are probably low in, you might not know, but maybe low in empathy. If you've ever taken the Gallup Strengths, I'm at the bottom with empathy. The secret is that we must engage people on their terms, not ours. We must care about things important to them, not us. And I think that's where a lot of our people that are trying to get teams to move forward, we're not taking enough time to really get to know them. Scrum Masters are actually quite good at this, but maybe they're not always that way at first. The rule really is that people don't care so much about what we know and how great we can make the team if they don't think that we care about them as human beings to begin with. So again, thinking about starting your leadership inside in your heart first, it will help your mind to focus on things that you need to be thinking about and all the different techniques and ways that you can improve the team in your mind. And then ultimately that'll come out in your hands, because what we're really saying is we're talking about your identity. So if you see yourself as a caring human being and you are sharing those behaviors, it just comes out because it's natural. That's who you have become. And we shouldn't presume that people want to know about us, but sometimes we think they should, because we ask about them, that they want to know about us. They certainly want to know a few things about us. We'll talk about that in a minute. But as far as our problems and things that we care about, unless we've spent the time to ask them about what theirs are, regardless of what they're telling us, that might take a while to build the trust without being able to go that way. And I think this parallels very well to what a real shepherd does, because they spend most of their time out in the field watching over their people. They watch over their flock, and they eat where they're eating, they protect them, and they go through the same experiences that they do. And I think, Scrum Masters in particular, I think they do a really great job in spending that time with their people. For those of us that don't have that direct team interaction, it's harder. We have to make a special effort to be able to do some of those things. And why is this important? Well, it's really important because what we're really doing is we're cultivating the permission to lead. That's so different. When we're working with people, especially in these flat organizations, or if you do project management, you're working with multiple teams, you may not have a title that I can ask people to just go and do. And not saying that's not probably the best way to do it anyway. Most leaders that I've talked to, the senior leaders, they'll tell me, they said that their job is much more difficult with the title than before they had it. And I always thought that was remarkable, since I've never had a really big title and not looking for one. But they would describe that it's extremely frustrating because they have to really count on their people to deliver and do the things that need to get done to fulfill the vision and the mission. And I thought, well, couldn't you just ask them or tell them to do it? I guess it's not as easy as what we would think. And so there's probably an opportunity for us to show empathy to our leaders who are working so hard at setting the direction and the vision for the organizations. I think there's probably something there for us to learn and appreciate. But cultivating permission to lead is incredibly important. The third principle, and hopefully you're catching on here, it's sequential, but yet they all keep going. The third one is really helping people connect with us. So if we've done step number 1 and we're doing step number 2, then step number 3 is people do want to know about us. It's just they don't want to know about us all at first, and if we're not wanting to care about them. Because trust really it's the foundation for connection. And the way that you can communicate with your teams, if you haven't tried this before, it's really using stories. People love that. We gather around stories. You tell stories to your kids, or you've heard them when you were a kid. And the ones that make the most impact are ones that that touch you inside, deep inside in some way. And ones that relate your values to other people, because if they can connect with you through a story that shows a value like family or honesty or integrity, you name it, they will connect with that and they will remember that story for a long time. Speak your values out loud. Sometimes we're afraid. Don't be afraid. Too many people are afraid. Speak your values out loud. Let people know where you stand. Then they can know if they want to come with you. If you want to cultivate that permission to lead, they need to trust you, and they're not going to trust you if you don't tell them who you are and what you stand for. Another thing, and this is more of a practical thing that you can take away. I've used this many times. You probably, maybe some of you have used it too. But in a meeting, if it's the appropriate time and it's a small enough group, you can go around to each individual and just mention something that you've noticed that they've done really well. Do it publicly, just real quick. Go around the room, share with them. And what that does is a couple things. Number one, it shows that you're paying attention. Too many times, leaders, me too, we're always focused on the things that we need to fix, the things that are wrong, the things that need to be improved. But seldom do we spend the time going, wow, how did we do this so well, guys? This is really great. Other than just saying it was great. You hear that a lot. But if you can mention something specific about a person and then tell them why that was important, you're catching them doing the right thing, and you're building the team. You're showing them and leading them by example the way that you want them to treat other people on the team. I hope that helps you, because today people are looking for authentic leaders. We don't have enough of this, and you are all in a position, especially in the inner parts of the organization, where you're supporting leadership, or maybe you are a senior leader. We have an opportunity to influence other people. And if you've been leading long enough, you realize that a checklist or a map probably isn't good enough, because the terrain that we're covering is new and it's changing. And so what I teach people is I teach them, you need to trade the map for a compass. And what does that mean? Well, that means that you use your compass, all those things that we talked about in step 1, your values and caring for other people, to plot the way forward in a way that protects your team and also builds the organization. A couple of great books here for you to check out if you're interested, but it will help you to share your whole self at work. And you just use your values as your compass. You can teach other people how to do that. Now, if you're going on a trip, I would recommend taking a map too, or your GPS. That's a great tool to have, but it's not the primary tool that I use anymore. And I think that as we grow and we become more confident in what we can do and how we can help, really it's our values, and that'll help us to set the direction. There are a couple tools though And I love doing this in a live presentation with video and all of that. But there's a couple tools, the staff and the rod. And in particular, the staff is the most important one for a shepherd. And people will say, well, why a shepherd? Why sheep? Why? It's not about the sheep, okay? It's not about the sheep. People aren't sheep. But the idea is about how do you relate to your flock? It's really about the shepherd themselves. It's the attitudes that they have and what they need to do in order to earn and cultivate the team so that they will follow in any circumstance, in any situation. So the primary thing I feel like leaders need to be able to provide to their teams to be effective, and we touched on this in one of the problems, but it's really around vision. Do you know where you're going? If we're going to coach teams, we have to have an idea of how to win the game. Or if you're a different type of coach, we have to know how we're going to get there. If you're going to be a guide, you have to be able to plot the way. And if you have to use a map or if it's a compass, whatever it is, we have to share with our team where we're going to go. We have to share where we're going to go, don't we? What I do that's different, and maybe what you do also, is, well, we ask the team to help us build the plan so that we can get their buy-in. And ultimately, we let everybody have a say. Might take more time, but that'll help you get the results you're looking for. Let everyone have a say. And then ultimately, the decision is made, and then you learn and you adjust as you go. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to, you do have to have an idea of where you want to take the team, because if we don't, they might not know where we're going. And especially if we haven't done those other steps we talked about, they might be really hesitant. And so we want them to come freely. And this brings us to, how appreciated do you feel in the work that you're doing and in the value that you're delivering? I love this question. And I'm really, really curious. I was telling Lori, I'm really curious what people are going to say about this tonight. So do you feel appreciated for the value you deliver?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question for Scrum Masters, especially because a lot of what we do is under the hood. And, one of the characteristics is, can you lead a team and have it be, unnoticed, really? I know for myself, a lot of the times I realize how much work goes into that to make it look seamless and completely invisible. And then I complain about not being noticed. So it's a conflict. All right, let me share some results here.
Oh, I am so happy to see that. I didn't know what we would find tonight, but people are feeling appreciated for the work. That is awesome. That's terrific. I'm glad to see that.
Oh, and thanks for pointing out my typo there. I feed appreciated. Yep.
Oh, who said that?
Somebody noticed my typo there, so that was a good one. I probably was hungry when I made that poll. I feel appreciated. All right.
Okay. Well, principle 4, it requires building safe places for your team. So where does your team do their best work? And that's more figuratively speaking, because in shepherding, what I teach is that safety is the result of the work that you've already done. It's not something that you do by itself. So when I hear about organizations or individuals trying to say, we need to build more safety, we need to do this or that, we've already lost that, if that's what we're after. Because first of all, you have to be someone worth following. Second, you have to have already engaged your team in a way that they're starting to trust us. And then they have to know that you're worth trusting, and connecting with them through your values. So those are the 3 things that will actually build the safe places for your teams. So think about that when next time you hear an organization or a leader talking about building safety. You know what to do. You have the game plan. We've just talked about it. So in my experience, it really does come down to one conversation at a time. and talking with people, not so much at people, hearing what they have to say. There's a few people on this call that I know from the past that actually, they probably showed me that way in my career. And so it's really cool to see them on the call tonight. And I'm sure that a lot of you do that already, but sometimes just calling it out is important. We do have a responsibility, however, to preserve the safe places. And this is where the work comes in. So really, we're talking about setting boundaries. And boundaries aren't a limitation on the team. They're actually protecting the team. And those of you that feel like you're too constrained or whatever, think about this in these terms. It might help. It helped me because, first of all, the boundary helps us to protect the team from themselves. And some people, they don't know better. They think they do, but they don't. And just remember, as you were growing up as a kid, you did things that maybe were against the rules, but you didn't know really what the danger was. And so guess what? That's our responsibility to help set those boundaries for them, not because we're being mean, but because we're trying to help them. And if we can just keep the team together, we have a better chance of being successful. The second reason is it protects the team from others that want to damage the team. And we can identify those people pretty quick because they're probably coming after you first because you're the leader. And they also, and this is important, they also tell you who's on your team and who's not. Those that stay in the boundary and try to help and preserve the team, you know, they're on your team. Those that are trying to wander off and do all these other things, they probably belong on a different team because they're certainly not helping you. I hope that all makes sense to you, because when you have the boundaries and we set those up, we achieve really what we're after, which is we help people feel safe, because when they feel safe, they can do their best work. And when they do feel safe, it's where they're supposed to be. They like knowing where they're supposed to be. Haven't you ever felt like, boy, I wish we had a little more clarity around what we're doing, how we're going to do this, instead of all the ambiguity? Of course, we have to have some of that. But when we have clarity, then we can accomplish more faster when we know what we're going after. So let me ask you, I've talked a lot about what I think are important leadership qualities. What do you think? What is the most important leadership quality to you? You can choose more than one. Let's see, I guess I could take this, but I like all of these, but I'll select a couple here. Okay. What are people saying?
A couple more seconds. Looks like we're still thinking.
Looks like
Right.
I'm writing on the slide there.
Let's take a peek.
The winner is integrity. I love that. Yeah, that makes sense. That can encompass a bunch of these. Well, maybe I want to be on your team. I guess we are on the same team. No, that's terrific. Well, when we look at what some of the authors in this area, one of my favorite leadership books is The Leadership Challenge by Kouzes and Posner. And they tell us that the attributes of the most admired leaders are honesty, forward-looking, inspiring, and confident. And that's based on research across many different countries that they collected. It's a really great book. Foundational if you just want to buy one leadership book, I'd buy that one. But there are a couple of questions that people want to know about us. We kind of talked about that in step 3. It's important, especially when you're forming a new team. There's 2 things they're looking for. And I love the integrity part because it really plays in here. The first question is, are you competent? Can you help me? Like if I get in trouble, are you going to back me up? Are you going to be able to, if I get stuck, to come and get me? Are you able to do those things? And the second one is probably a lot more important, actually, and it's, can they trust you? Can they trust you? to do the right thing and to really provide that leadership that they need. They'll be very forgiving about number one, but if they don't trust you, then the game is over with the team. So those of you who have done this, it sounds like, most of the people have been coaching for at least 5 years. That is, you already have learned that lesson probably the hard way at some point. I know I have. So let's talk about principle number 5. And I think this is somewhat unique in servant leadership, but in particular, what I call shepherd leadership. And that is, it requires us to live somewhat sacrificially in how we're leading. There's so many things that we want to do. There's so many things that we could do, and just because we could do doesn't mean we should do. And this is all that stuff we were talking about, coming from our heart first and caring about the people that are around us. And I would wager a bet that all of you probably are in that category. But let me ask you this. Here's kind of the question. So when you see people suffering, what's your response? Like, what do you feel when you sense that's happening? Is it, well, that's not my job? Or do you start thinking about, how can I help? That's a tough one. For many years, I pretty much could guarantee you I would say it wasn't my job. That's not my job, that's that other person's job. I don't think that way anymore. And a lot of things have changed for me once I changed my mind about that. And so now when I see things like this, where on our teams, I feel like if we see that people are feeling nervous or they're suspicious about what leadership is talking about or what their teams are doing, what other teams are doing, or people are bothering them, could even be their boss, but they just have a misunderstanding, usually is all it is. They're not really trying to be empathetic towards the other person's position. Nobody, I've found, really comes to work wanting to do terrible work. They're not really coming to work to go and create problems. It's not why they're coming. And so as soon as we start thinking about things in the terms of the other person, it brings us a lot closer to being a successful servant leader. And rivalries, we can get rid of those through creating new opportunities for people so they don't have to compete against themselves, but they can, or against other people, they can compete in different ways and try to bring the best out of them. So when we want to lead sacrificially, I'm talking about helping other people overcome obstacles that may actually cost us too, in some of these things, because we're spending all this time and effort in developing other people. We might not get some of the recognition that we deserve for the work that we do. And I am telling you that we need to be okay with that. We need to be okay with that because you're living your values. And at the end of the day, the work continues. The work continues, the next project comes. But when you leave everything on the table, what is the value that you've put into people? I feel like our legacy as the leaders, agile champions, just good human beings is found in what we've left in others. What have we deposited in other people that can live on is far more important than the job that we have. The work that you do is so critically important. And that brings us to the last principle, which we're just exploring, which is really a celebration of people, celebration of projects that we've completed, achievements within your organizations, within your families. And, and I'm so glad people are feeling appreciated, because in all my years, I've never heard anybody complain about being over appreciated. Have you? I haven't. And when we do celebrate each team member, you're going to get a stronger team. And I think that's what we're all after. If we build stronger teams using these principles, you're doing servant leadership. That's really what it is. If you go back and you want to look at Robert Greenleaf's work, which really coined the phrase servant leadership, although the practice of what we're talking about has happened for thousands of years, I suspect, and you could find in other literature. But he, I think, is the one that coined the phrase servant leader, and there's 10 different steps. And it's like, wow, 10 steps. I can't remember 10 steps, but I can remember 6 because I practice 5 of them pretty regularly. The hardest one for me is probably the celebration part. And that's just a personality thing. Some people are really great at celebration. That's why I ask them to organize all the fun stuff and things that we do like that. But I'm certainly supportive of it, and I hope you are too. So these are, I always have like all these different books and things like that that I reference because that's where I got the ideas from that I've built the framework around. Because if you lead the way that you're gifted, frankly, you understand and appreciate your own voice, you know, how your story has developed over the years. And I think that alone, just on its own, is worth celebrating. And bringing this awareness to your team and celebrating your team and helping to inspire them. They don't get that in many other places. I think that's remarkable too. And what you'll find is that the paradigm that we talked about at the beginning with running around, all those cats running around, it can look different. And here's the contrast for you, because I think this whole shepherding heart, that's what I name what we're talking about, is really something that begins in the heart, as I said. It goes into our minds, helping us to think about what we can do with what we have, what we've been given, and we can start working out those things with our teams, in our families, and our communities. But here's the catch, and there's always a catch, isn't there? The catch to this is that it's not going to happen by itself. And guess what? When I was in grade school, we used to play sports. And when we would play sports, we would get out on the playground and we'd all line up. Some of you have heard this story before, probably. We all line up and we pick teams, and there'd be a couple captains, and all of us kids that weren't the captains, we'd be raising our hands, pick me, pick me. And for years, I was one of those kids. And then I read this book by Seth Godin. Not sure if you've heard of him, but he convinced me to think differently, and that the time of waiting to be picked is over. It's time for you to start picking yourself. You can become the change that you want to see in the world, as Gandhi said. And to do that, you only have to think back about what are some of the greatest challenges that you have. Some of the things that you've encountered in your life that are very unique to you, but yet the pain and the suffering or the excitement and achievement is something that crosses over into other individuals. And for me, I would say I started realizing this not that long ago. Back in 2014, it really is when I discovered that whole gap thing I presented early on. That's when I started noticing it. I became self-aware that I wasn't the leader that I could be. And I got selected into a leadership program where I work. And I just committed within myself, and I said, Eric, I said, you really need to think and take advantage of this time. And so I really did. I took it really seriously. And that's a lot of where all of this, what you're seeing tonight, came from, is me thinking really hard about that and having a heart change. Because I had a friend of mine during that time who had passed away, and it got me thinking about, if I just keep doing what I'm doing, where am I going to be? Where am I going to be? Am I going to end up where I want to be? And I decided it wasn't. So as part of my transformation, I started thinking back about what is one of the hardest things. And we all have a lot of hard things. But for me, part of my story was I left my first corporate job after just a couple years, and I joined the Peace Corps. Some of you on the call tonight, you know the story already. Sorry you have to hear it again. But I joined the Peace Corps, and I was sent to Senegal, West Africa. And I was 23 years old. I had a 3-month training program where I learned just rudimentary language skills. And if you know me today, I can hardly speak English sometimes. It's not my biggest strength. And so I was over there and I was super frustrated. I could communicate enough to, I don't know, maybe I was like a 3 or 4-year-old. The place where I was a very small village. I was like 33 kilometers from the main road. There's one volunteer that was close to me, and he left after being in his sight for about 8 months. It was super, super hard. I thought about quitting, but this was my moment. And it was such an interesting time in my life where I had to decide, is it worth giving up or leaning into? And I began thinking, I didn't have this book in mind at the time, but I was a little bit afraid, honestly. And I thought, well, if you feel afraid, you should go the other way. But what I'm learning now, and this might be encouraging to you, I hope it is that when you're afraid of something, maybe that's exactly where you need to go. Maybe that one thing, that one obstacle, just on the other side of it, you can get there, but you have to go through it. You just can't get there any other way. So I love Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art, and he calls this the resistance. And it's such a descriptive and accurate name for what it feels like. But you know, if you can get through a tough time like that, you can hold on to that for the rest of your life, I think, and you can continue to build on it. And for me, I think the biggest thing that I took away from Peace Corps was generosity. Not so much that I was generous, but the people there were generous to me. They were like always helping me out. They felt sorry for the white foreigner living in their village and couldn't do anything. You know, they're always taking care of me. And I appreciated that so much that I'm always like looking to pay back. If you're curious, this is where I live. These were my two huts. I lived in one and had a motorcycle in the other one because I was like so far away from everybody else. And there's always kids and stuff in there just hanging out. You'd think you could get rid of them. You can't because they just keep coming back. No running water, no electricity, 2-year commitment. But it was a flashpoint for me that really began my transformation to become a shepherd leader. I don't know if I could have done it without that. I don't know if I would have found like servant leadership without having gone through that and reflecting through it. But you know, I think that all of you have a hard time in your life that you can reflect upon, and really what that makes possible is the gift. And I think that we all have it, that you all have a gift to give. I think the gift that you have is actually yourself. And what is a gift for? A gift is to give out to other people. So there's something inside each and every one of us that we need to get out into the world. That's part of my mission, is like enabling people, calling that gift out of people. So I ask them, what is it that you have to give? What is the trial that you've been through that you can leverage to connect with other people, to help them in creating safe places for your team, sharing those moments, those special moments that were hard and some that were really fun. And you can find opportunities to lead differently. One of the principles that I teach individuals that I work with in community work is everything that we do, I want to do uniquely better. Not as a competition to anybody else, but to set the highest standard for our team in excellence. Let's make it the best that we can so that people like look at what we did and what we accomplished and they're going, I don't know how they did that. And they even try to copy it because it was so good. That's what I'm looking to do with my work and with the teams and with the agile mindset and the agile practices that you're doing. Do it uniquely better. Do it in the way that only you can do it. And so I want to just encourage you to take the next step in your leadership, in your coaching, whatever that is. You probably have it in mind. It's like, oh, I need to do something. And you're probably doing it, but I just encourage you to keep doing it. Your people need you so much. So let's review real quick. You know, we covered a lot of things, the 6 principles, the problems. The idea here is develop yourself, take responsibility, and keep growing. Engage people on their terms. Remember that. It's really foundational. Always respect everyone. Respect the leadership that are above you. Understand they have unique pressures. If you've ever been a supervisor, they're doing so much for us that we have no idea. And Lori kind of mentioned, you know, there's so many things that we do that maybe we feel like we should be thanked for. I would encourage you to write a note to your supervisor and thank them just for doing all the extra stuff. There's a lot to it, actually. Work with individuals who want to work with you. Super important if you're building a new team. Don't work with people who don't want to work with you. I've tried that. The results aren't very good. If they want to just do their own thing, their own way, and you have a choice, always pick the ones that want to be with you on your team and can buy into the vision and how you're leading. And certainly lead by example. Don't ask someone to do something that you won't do or that you're not doing. That doesn't help, and people will notice. They're always watching us. Anyone that's trying to lead other people, they're always watching, even when you think they're not. So use your tools and your techniques, the ones that you've developed, that you've cultivated, teach those to other people. Boy, you get so much better at it every time that you teach someone. I know you coaches know that. And please put the welfare of your team first. You're not going to regret that. Celebrate the people, celebrate your accomplishments together. And I think as you do this, you're going to find that the gap, whatever it was for you, it's going to close. It's going to get smaller. In agile terms, you're going to increase your velocity and you're going to achieve better results quicker. And that's really my hope for you, is that you feel like, boy, this can be done. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. Just be your best self every day, whatever that is. Just do that thing. And so some of you might be thinking, what's next? It's only so much you can cover in a session like this. Everybody's tired. You've had a long day. Well, if you want to help me, if I can help you, spread the word. I have a blog. I write about things like this. I usually publish once a week. You can take that, use that on your team, or you can send it out as just, if it's an idea that you agree with and you don't know what your team would say, you can say, hey, this dum-dum over here, he's sharing this. What do you think about it? Use it in any way that you can. If you have ideas I can write about, happy to consider that, or ask me to come to your group and share if this isn't the thing that you want to do yourself, but maybe I can help you. That's what my mission is. That's what I'm here for. And then finally, if you've had a transformation yourself, I would love to hear about that. And you can reach me at eric@shepherdingheart.com. So I am here really at your service. This is all I have to share tonight. I hope that you've taken away something, a technique, an idea, or just been encouraged or challenged to just continue to grow in your coaching, because it's so valuable and it's so important. And I so thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Lori.